Hi all, greetings of the day. So in this video, we're going to look at Gabriel Okara's The Mystic Drum, and since the interpretation is quite long, I've divided it into two videos, and so this is part one of the poem. So here we go. Let's first look into who Gabriel Okara is. He is one of the earliest Nigerian poets, and he was one of them to write in English. But then he took care that his African or Nigerian rhythms, imagery, and worldview of African oral tradition are all preserved. And he was an Ijo Babat, and he believed that English could be transformed to express African sensibility. I'll talk about it later in this poem. So, consequently, his poetry often started reflecting indigenous myths, communal rituals, spirituality, and traditional philosophy rather than just employing English poetic conventions. So, his works influenced by African cosmology. When I say African cosmology, where human beings, nature, spirits, and ancestors exist in an interconnected universe, so his works were normally influenced by African cosmology. Unlike many modern poets, he did not separate the physical from the spiritual. Okara presents reality as a harmonious continuum in which every living and non-living entity participates in a cosmic rhythm, and that's his speciality. So this particular poem, The Mystic Drum, is simultaneously an allegory of Africa before and after colonialism, or I should say pre-colonialism and post-colonialism, and it's a symbolic representation of innocence and experience, a philosophical reflection of intuition and rationality, and is a lament for the disappearance of traditional African values. That's one thing that we notice in all of these African writers. They are really very concerned about how their traditional African values are fast disappearing. So let's look into the first stanza of the poem. The mystic drum in my inside. This is how it goes. So the poem seems to be opening from a media res. It's opening in the middle of an event. And what's that? We find that the speaker is already experiencing spiritually. He's got something of a spiritual experience going on, and the speaker does not explain to us what it is. But then he's saying when the drum, he suddenly begins with the drum, and he calls the drum a mystic drum, and he says the mystic drum began beating because its rhythm is eternal. It's eternal. First point. Next, it's within me. Then let's note, he doesn't say it is within me. He says in my inside. So he makes use of English the way he wants it. So he does not, so he manipulates the English expressions the way he wants it. The speaker feels that the mystical drum exists within him, and so it's not just a physical instrument, but it's an inner spiritual force that he hears. And this mystic drum symbolizes the speaker's African cultural identity, especially it speaks of his ancestral heritage, spirituality, and the inner creativity. So it's there innate in them. It's nothing away from them. It's not an outer source. It's an inner source. So it reflects the African idea that tradition and spirituality are not external objects, but they are living forces within individuals. So the mystic drum in my inside, anybody and everybody will be really surprised with the expression in my inside. That's a striking feature. And we find that Okara deliberately uses this expression to reflect African speech patterns because he is translating them into English. And so this is one of his stylistic technique which we need to note down. And he talks about the African experience in the way he wants it. So he does not adapt the African experience to an English idiom. Rather, he reshapes English. He wields English in such a way that he can accommodate African consciousness in it. So the language itself becomes a political act of cultural resistance. So we find that after that line, we see that and fishes danced in the rivers. So the power of the drum is so great that even the fishes are dancing and they respond by dancing. We know that we normally don't say fishes, it's fish. Okay, so and when they hear the drum beat, the fish also respond. And so the line shows the drum's magical influence on all aspects of nature or different elements of the natural world. And the fish here represent all forms of life, and how they seem to be responding to the harmony or the balance created by tradition and spirituality. So the image suggests a world where humans, animals, and nature exist in unity. And human beings also join in the celebration created by the drum's rhythm. When he says, and men and women danced on land. So not just the fishes in the water, but men and women also. So from the water, he moves to the land to show how the drum has an impact on the entire world. So the line emphasizes the community, shared joy, and social harmony, and dance in fact represents their cultural expression and collective identity, because we know that Africans are very much known for their music and dance. So all the dancing happens because of the rhythm that was produced by the speaker's drum. And this possessive word, my, it really talks about the pride that he takes in his community, or how he himself associates, how he associates himself with the community, and so on. So the word my highlights the speaker's personal connection with his cultural heritage. And the drum's rhythm, so to the rhythm of my drum, represents the heartbeat of African life and tradition. It suggests that art and music are part and parcel of their life, and they have power and they have more power to connect humans with nature, and not just with the different elements of nature, but with each other too. So now we move on to stanza 2, and let's pay attention to this stanza because this is going to come as a refrain. And we know that in the oral tradition, the African oral tradition, refrains play a vital role. So let's see what it says. It says, but standing behind a tree. It begins with the conjunction but. So it tries to contrast whatever the speaker has told us earlier, and it says that from a contrasting point of view, he seems to be approaching the woman. And the woman, where is she standing? She's standing behind a tree, and that tells us about how she's hidden, distant, and unattainable. Okay, so the tree here, she's standing behind a tree, and the tree here symbolizes nature, purity, and we all know that the African world cannot be separated from nature. So when the woman is standing behind a tree, we understand how a woman is in close proximity with nature, how she is still innocent, how she is unspoiled by the natural environment. So her position behind the tree also creates a kind of mystery. We wonder why she's standing behind the tree and not in front of the tree or beside the tree. So it's just that the poet wants us not to understand, tell us that we cannot understand the woman fully. With leaves around her waist. So the leaves there has the function of natural clothing, and it talks to us about how the woman is very deeply connected with nature. And it also symbolizes innocence, simplicity, and purity, and how she is totally free from the modern civilization, urbanization, and all the other modern influences. So this image of the woman having the leaves around her waist takes us to the primitive Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve lived that way in harmony with nature soon after their creation by God. So the poet contrasts the natural world with that of the materialistic world or the artificial world, and that really started flanking the modernized world. So the refrain proceeds further this way. It says, she only smiled with a shake of her head. We do not know in what way she shaked. The woman's smile talks us about or tells us about her gentleness, her affection for people, and it projects her as a very soft woman who is not hostile. But then she shakes her head, which is a sign of refusal or rejection. So here, smile and refusal, they create a kind of a bittersweet mood, telling us about how she is both kind and how she is also wary of all the danger that engulfs her, and she keeps herself distant from all of them. So it's just a response, and through this response, she tells the speaker that she does not accept him, and that she's very skeptical of him, because she probably is able to gauge that the speaker has already started losing his innocence and harmony with nature, all that she represents. Okay, so now we know that this is a poetic device, refrain, that's been used by Okara. And this refrain has a great function to perform. It's a central symbolic device of the poem, and it reinforces the themes of cultural identity, the conflict between tradition and modernity, alienation, innocence, and irreversible loss. And it gives the poem its rhythmic and emotional unity also. And we will find throughout the poem that the refrain is repeated, and with each repetition it deepens its meaning. And not just that, when you trace the African oral tradition, we find that it has lots of repetition, or rather it has lots of refrains in it, meaning to tell us that Okara has seen to it that the techniques of the African oral tradition are beautifully blended into his written poems of these days. So we move on to the third stanza, and we hear the speaker telling us that still my drum continued to beat. So still suggests that the drum has not taken a break, and it's a continuing activity, and that the drum is persistent despite all the obstacles and rejection. Let's understand one thing. Drum can be equated with Africa itself as a land, or Africans themselves. Okay, and this drum has, despite all the challenges and rejections that it had to face, it still keeps beating. So there is the vibrancy of this Africans that's reflected through this drum. So the mystic drum symbolizes the speaker's inner spirit and the eternal rhythm of life, and it's a continuing activity, highlighting upon the fact that their cultural roots are still alive, and how the speaker is still connected to his roots despite being attracted by modern influences. So rippling the air with quicken. So the phrase rippling the air, normally we find ripples in water, but here it's rippling the air. So the poet tries to create an auditory imagery along with the visual imagery also. So the drum beat seems to be creating a kind of ripples in the atmosphere as ripples are created in water. So quicken, rippling the air with quicken. This particular word here helps in increasing the tempo of the poem. So there is fastness, and it creates a kind of an excitement and urgency in the speaker. So there is an increasing rhythm, and this increasing rhythm symbolizes the growing power and influence of tradition on these people as they try to eventually or gradually move towards modernization and urbanization. So here you find tempo, compelling the quick. Tempo refers to the speed of or the rhythm of the drum beat, and the quick means the living, how active they are, how they keep pace with the rhythm of the drum beat. And the drum's rhythm is so powerful that it compels the living also to dance, and suggesting that cultural traditions can always bring together their own people into a community, uniting them and energizing them. And the dead to dance and sing. See, it's not just the living that get attracted to the drum beat, but even the dead. We know that the Africans value their ancestors a lot, and they give respect to their dead also. So drum influences both the living and the dead, telling us how supernatural and timeless power can be affected through this drum beat. And so this reflects the African belief that ancestors remain spiritually connected to the living community. So the line seems to be highlighting or underscoring upon the fact that the continuity of cultural traditions can be witnessed across generations, starting from the dead to the living. And with their shadows, it seems to be affecting it with their shadows. And shadows is the word that symbolize spirits, memories, and the presence of ancestors. So they are not frightened by the shadows, but they are dancing with their shadows, telling about how there is a kind of a union of the physical with the spiritual world, and it creates a kind of a mysterious atmosphere to see shadows dancing. And so this basically brings in the poem's theme or title of the poem, or it reinforces the title of the poem, The Mystic Drum. So let's move on to stanza 4, and it's a refrain again. It's the same refrain, but standing behind a tree with leaves around her waist, she only smiled with a shake of her head. Probably it's a continuous reminder from this woman, a woman who even represents Africa, who stands for Africa, reminding or looking at her children, the Africans, reminding them of how they cannot be far away from their land, how they cannot go away from their culture, how they have to be closer with their culture. Okay, so now let's move on to stanza 5. It says, then the drum beat with the rhythm. And again the drum beat. Earlier on, the previous stanza, it was still. Now the word that marks its continuum is then. So it's a new stage, okay, and it's not the same, it's a different one. And you find that there's the drum's influence, and the influence of the drum is so powerful that you feel the pulse of the African tradition here. When I say the pulse of the African tradition, the drum talks about the natural and spiritual life of Africa, and it's the heartbeat of the universe. It's the continuity of the cultural heritage, and so on, of the things of the ground. So things of the ground brings us down from some supernatural realm or from some heavenly realm to the plains, to the ground, talking about nature, plants, animals, the earth, and all the living beings in it. So it emphasizes humanity's close relationship, especially the Africans' close relationship with the natural world or with the elements of nature. And so the line talks about how the drum echoes the rhythm of the earth. So it's not just the rhythm of the community, it's not just the rhythm of an individual African, but it's the rhythm of the earth itself, highlighting upon how there is a harmony between humans and nature. And invoke the eye of the sky. So invoked means called upon or summoned. So the eye of the sky symbolizes the all-seeing, the omniscient, the all-seeing heavens, or the all-seeing divine powers, especially that of the sun. So we understand how they revere different aspects of nature, how they really have a reverential approach to each element of nature, how they look at nature, how they perceive nature as something divine, as a divine power, especially the sun. So the line suggests that the drum possesses spiritual power that's capable of connecting the earth with the heavens. That's really amazing. So the sun stands for life, energy and creation. It says the sun and the moon and the river gods. So drum beat influences the fishes on the fishes in the river. It then moves on to the land. Then it talks about the how it influences the dead, also the living and the dead. And now it has moved on to a different plane of how it seems to be affecting the cosmology or the cosmic also. So the moon, it seems to be affecting the moon too, and the river gods. It says the moon here, we understand, symbolizes mystery, and it talks about the cycles. The Africans normally believe in life cycles, so they always begin, and whatever begins come to the same end also. So the end is the beginning is the end for them. So it talks about the cycles and the spiritual wisdom. So the river gods here represent African indigenous beliefs in the sacredness of nature, in the holiness of nature, in the different, in the reverential approach to different elements of nature. And so together these images tell us about how the drum serves as a unifier of natural and supernatural forces. And you see, look at this picture, huh? It's beautiful, right? And so you find that the trees began to dance. So here the trees are made to dance like human beings, meaning to say that the trees are personified because they have the human ability to dance, and it shows how the nature responds joyfully to the drum's rhythm. So not just elements of nature, but nature itself. So the line, this poetic line or this verse implies upon again the universal harmony in which each and every aspect of nature, every entity of creation participates. And here, look at this. The fishes turn men. So as I told you, life for them is cyclical. Okay, so here men become fish, and this is an example of transformation, of metamorphosis, and it symbolizes the mystic power or the mysterious power that the drum holds, because it can dissolve the boundaries. Men and the fish come together, blend together to become one being. Okay, so it dissolves the boundaries between different forms of life, and it again reflects the unity and interconnectedness of all creation. As I told you now, and men turned fishes, so it's cyclical. So this reversal emphasizes the equality and interdependence. That's very, very important. For the Africans, they are not just an individual, but they are interdependent with nature. So humans are dependent on nature, and so is nature dependent on the human beings, and that is what it means. So this suggests that all life shares the same spiritual essence, and the transformation or the change or the metamorphosis also mirror the magical realism found in African oral traditions. Okay, and things stop to grow. So time is frozen. Time seems to be at a standstill under the spell of the drum. So this suggests a moment of perfect harmony where ordinary natural processes are just suspended, and it emphasizes the overwhelming spiritual power of the mystic drum, which transcends the laws of nature, which breaks the boundaries of nature. So we move on to stanza 6, which is again a refrain, and it's the same. You find the woman behind a tree with leaves around her waist, and she only smiled with a shake of her head. Probably she doesn't approve of all that the Africans are doing in the present era in the name of urbanization and modernization. So with that, we come to the end of the part 1 of Mystic Drum. Thank you so much for your patient watching.